Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the Rise Up classroom today. My name is Vickie Miller, and I will be your instructor for today. And I'm so glad that you've joined me. Just a few housekeeping notes to share with you. That if you have any questions along the way, if you wouldn't mind just putting them into the chat, and after the presentation, I will do my very best to address all of your questions. And then also just to be aware that the presentation will be available on the Rise Up platform, and then also, of course, the weriseup.com. So thanks so much. So we'll go ahead and get started. So again, as I stated, my name is Vickie Miller, and when I was asked by Rise Up to provide a masterclass on onboarding processes, I was flattered. Of course, I was nervous, but I thought, I've been at this a long time, and all I want is really to kind of share some of my insights with you, some of the experiences I've had. And I hope that maybe some of the things that I have to share today will help you along your journey as far as being a fabulous instructor and trainer, and make you a master as well. Thanks so much. So just, we won't spend too much time about me, but just to give you a little bit of background, I've been at this, as you can see, for well over 18 years now. I've worked with multiple hospitality software companies, and I currently work for a company called Alliants. But I kind of started this whole process. I primarily focus on hospitality software, really working a lot with concierges over the years. And that's because I started with a background of concierge myself many, many moons ago, probably before some of you were even born. So just to kind of give you an idea. So as we proceed, I just want to kind of share some of the content that we plan to cover in the training today. So trainers, I like to think of us as relationship builders. Onboarding, knowing your customers, and learning what are the tools of the trade that are available to you out there, and what's love got to do with it? Now that's an interesting, what does love have to do with the training? So, and then of course, finalizing with surveys. What do they tell us? What can we learn from them? And then of course, we'll cover the Q&A. So here we go. So trainers, building relationships. I love this statement. This is from my former boss at GoConcierge, but it really kind of spoke to me. He said, the onboarding process is a first glimpse into the heart of the company and a wonderful opportunity to earn trust and build a relationship. Now, I know that some of you may train internally within your own company, and then maybe many of you, like myself, train externally to those who buy our product. I think the statement is true to kind of both of those types of customers, and we're going to cover a lot of that as we move forward. So what are the benefits to building relationships? Well, as a trainer, you are in a unique position to become kind of, I like to think of the bind or the thick of between a company and its customers, and again, whether that's internal or external. So we'll define internal customers and external customers as we proceed. But a good relationship could also mean growth for your company, your business, especially if you're working with an external customer and you build a relationship with that company. Sometimes as those team members move on to another company, ideally they take you with them. And that was kind of always my goal was I like to think that people can't live without whatever the product that I was sharing with them, so that as they progressed to another company, they always took me with them, and that's how we grew. We grew very organically in that respect. So trainers are also salespeople, and I'm sure you can all relate to this. Oftentimes, a product has been acquired, whether internally or for a company that's purchasing it for their own company. That product was sold by somebody, oftentimes to the general manager or to maybe at a corporate level. And oftentimes the end user is maybe not even aware that this new product is coming. So your job as a trainer is actually to kind of be another salesperson, isn't it? Because you have to sell the product, the software, to the end user. And in doing so, you have to kind of prove that it's worthy of their time to invest into learning this technology. What are the benefits to them? What are your credentials? For me, it was really nice being able to train a concierge software, having been a concierge. I used to joke all the time that, yeah, I feel your pain. I've got the scars to prove it. I know what you go through it in your job every day. And that really kind of helps buy-in. Again, they're the ones buying in and you're the person selling. So even though you're there to train, you need that buy-in. A good trainer possesses the following traits. So passion for people. If you are not into people and you don't have a passion to see them succeed, you may be in the wrong line of business. So you may want to reconsider. You're also a nurturer. I like to think of us as kind of like gardeners. We plant the little seeds, we nurture them to help them grow, and hopefully it branches off and just grows into this magnificent tree. So I never get tired of training. I mean, as you saw, I've been at this for 18 years, at least, just in hospitality software training. But it never tires me to see that I've taught somebody how to use a particular feature in the software, and to watch them the first time that they're entering it, and then when they press the enter and they see what they've created, their eyes light up. That never gets old for me. So that's what I mean by, passion and the nurture. You're also a performer. You're always on. Training is exhausting, but it's exhilarating too. And we'll kind of touch a little more about being, a performance artist when it comes to training. So like I said, trainers are relationship builders, especially for external customers, because when you think about it, sometimes you may be the only face of your company that your external customers ever see. So I like to say, make it a good one and celebrate your awesomeness. So just to share with you, these are some of the fabulous people that I've met along the way over the years. I've had the great good fortune of traveling around the world and bringing our software to different hotels. And again, building those relationships on the way. And the things that it's so rewarding, not just for your company, but on a personal level as well. You witness people getting promotions within their company that they work for, or you see them moving to another company because they've done such an awesome job that they get these other great opportunities as well. We've seen, our concierges through illnesses. We've witnessed cancers, and sadly, we've even lost some along the way. But we've also seen new births and people getting married and different celebrations. So it's, that's what work. We all have to work. Well, pretty much, I think we all have to work, but we should enjoy what we do. And hopefully we spend so much time working that building these relationships nurtures our soul as well. So onboarding, knowing your customers. This is really key to making you successful at training. So when we talk about the different customers, we talk, as I mentioned earlier, about internal customers and about external customers. And I think you all kind of know the difference, but just to make sure, internal customers are essentially for those individuals who are onboarding new team members within the company that they're working for, right? So it could be policies, it could be technology. External customers are those like a software company like I work for, that an external customer buys our software to bring that product into their hotel. So you have to gear training in different ways, some similarities, some differences, but always most important that you are selling, and you need to ensure that whomever you are training is buying into whatever it is that you're selling in your training. So we're first going to kind of talk about the internal customers. So whether you're onboarding a new team member or possibly introducing a new software tool, you have to keep a few things in mind, especially new team members. You've all been new team members at some point in your career. So you know what it's like when you come into a new company. It's not just learning technology, it's learning everything, right? Even just where the bathrooms are. You're going through multiple processes to learn the policies and procedures for that company. Maybe you're learning the layout of the building. So it can be information overload. So when you are designing training for new team members, kind of keep that in mind. Even external team members, it may be a new hotel, so everything they're learning is still new to them, and you're just piling one more thing on. So you just want to kind of keep that in mind as you're designing the training. Acronyms drive me nuts. If you can imagine that you've been working for the same company for 5 years, and everybody has their own jargon, every company has its own language and its own acronyms. And now this new hire comes on board, and if you're speaking company jargon and using lots of acronyms, you're going to lose them halfway. It's going to go like one ear and out the other, or right over their head. In some ways, you almost have to teach them another language. You have to be the interpreter or the translator. But keep that in mind. I always say approach training with fresh eyes. So fresh eyes basically means I've never seen this product before. I don't speak that language. Explain it to me like I'm a child, without dumbing it down, of course. So next thing. People are resistant to change, right? We know the one constant in life is change. So how do we overcome this hurdle? Well, you may need to change the tactics depending, again, on who your audience is. Are they tech savvy? Are they technophobic? I'm kind of the latter. I'm not the most tech savvy person. So when you're designing your training, you may need to kind of dumb it down a little without making the customer feel dumb. So just kind of pull it back a little and make sure you're very thorough in the way that you're explaining things. If they are tech savvy, then you can amp it up. But me, not being a tech savvy person, I can't really fake it either. It's okay to admit it. I always say you may as well be upfront and say, okay, I'm not the most tech savvy person, but I know this software. So let me, share my knowledge with you. Because they're going to, if they're super techie, they're going to smell, the fear on you anyway, like sharks to blood, or me to a taco truck, whichever comes first. External customers. So do your homework. Take time to research the customer. Make sure you know who your audience is. Call ahead if you need to. I can only share my personal experiences, and I work a lot with concierges, and they run the spectrum. So I can have, a kind of a younger, hipper hotel with a younger, hipper and techie team, but I can also have your lovely 5-star luxury hotel that's been kind of, been around for 150 years, and they have these fabulously seasoned concierges, but they're not the most tech savvy people, they're typing like this. So it's okay to call ahead, and you might have both, but gear your training to approach both of these methods. Design the training to show how your solutions alleviate the pain, right? So what are their pain points? Why did they buy your software in the first place? Well, remember a few things. What is the challenge? What is the challenge of why they decided to buy your software to alleviate the pain? What made your software stand out as opposed to them choosing another software? So in kind of knowing all these things, you can use to help you design a training that really specifically speaks to that particular audience. And how will it help? How will it improve their lives? So, also, I say monitor and follow up. Now, I don't mean go all stealth on them, creeper. Excuse me. But keeping in mind GDPR and things. But we've I've always worked with like cloud-based software. So I've had this wonderful advantage of being able to just check and make sure that they're signing in, for instance. I can't tell you how many times I'll email and say, how's everything going? Oh yeah, it's great. Well, is it? I know they haven't signed in for 3 days. So I might, pick up the phone and call or just say, are there any challenges I can address? But the other thing is you might want to consider, especially for those of you, I guess it doesn't matter, internal or external, consider designating a champion. So what is a champion? Well, that may mean you could have 6 people in the classroom, but one really just seems to kind of get it fairly quickly. It doesn't mean that you don't spend as much time with the rest. You do, and you handhold as best you can, but also take into consideration that champion, giving them a little extra attention to make sure that they really get it. Because once you leave, you kind of take your expertise with them. But if you leave a champion behind that, that really gets it, then the rest of those team members that were in that classroom that are all kind of learning at a different rate, they have a champion within their own company or within their own department that they can turn to for a little bit of extra help and hand-holding. Now, learning tools of the trade. There's a lot out there these days, which is absolutely wonderful because people train and learn at a different pace and in different ways. So for those of you, I'm sure many of you are familiar with VARC. So we're talking about the way people learn. So visual learners, audio learners, reading and writing, and then kinesthetic, which are kind of those hands-on learners. And some people are kind of a combination. I'm actually a combination of 3 of the 4. I'm visual, audio, and kinesthetic. So I like somebody to show me, but then I also need to kind of jump in there and try it. So as you design onboarding processes and training and such, kind of keep the VARC in mind because we all learn differently. Think about yourself. How do you learn? Talk to your colleagues. Ask them how they learn best. And as you start to design that training, keeping this in mind, then you're going to basically create a recipe for success. So technology, yeah, times are changing. We're becoming so much more dependent on technology. Even as a trainer who trains a technological software, I use other technology to facilitate that. So, consider different tools that are out there. I'm going to share a few examples that I do with our company in that I've incorporated a combination of these things and created a learning portal. So just an example, I use a program called WalkMe, which is basically for the kinesthetic learner, so that we build it directly into our platform. So when people get stuck or they're not sure, they can just click and it kind of says, okay, fill this in. Fill this in. There's little videos that I incorporate into the training so that people can access those videos afterwards with me literally kind of walking them through the steps again. We have what we call like a README, so that for those people who just want to read through, we still accompany it with like a short video, just no speaking. It's just click, click, click here, so that what they've read, they can visualize it and hopefully learn from there. And then there's so many different platforms. So like some of the ones that I've listed here, WordPress, Absorb, Docebo, Learn-Upon, I'm not promoting any of them, but just know that there's dozens out there. And I encourage you to research them and find what works best for you. And maybe it might be like ourselves, it may be a combination of these different platforms to create a great learning portal. So as I said, we created this kind of Alliance University. And what I do is whether I'm doing on-site training or video training, I still, even after on-site training, I still give them access to the portal for a couple of reasons. It just reinforces what you've already taught them, but also as other team members maybe later down the road, months later, start onboarding, that at least they can put that colleague into another room, have them go through the learning portal, and then when they come out, then we can kind of, the colleagues help with the nuances of the learning of the platform. So this is just kind of a quick example of what my university looks like. So there's segments that they can choose getting started. When they play that, then they see the platform itself, and then they see little videos of me guiding them through. And keep those kind of limited, right? I do mine in 1 to like maybe 4-minute snippets. Again, so it's not information overload. They have a chance to absorb that feature. We also built in little quizzes in between. So it's not rocket science, but it's just to ensure that they've kind of absorbed and understood what you've shown them before they proceed to the next. So when they go into that portal, they can choose, the video, the audio visual, or they can choose to what we call read me, or they can choose the kinesthetic with the walk me. So just some things that might help you to kind of reinforce a lot of what you're training, both internally and externally to your customers. Now, I'd like to talk about delivery. And I always say, what's love got to do with it? Well, it has a lot to do with it in how you train, how you deliver your training to your wider audience. Passion comes through, and so does boredom. Okay, so you have to feel passionate. Your joy, your excitement is infectious. So have fun with it. Show up ready and energized. One of the things that I have learned to ask in advance, especially if I'm going to an on-site training, is that I ask the hotel, in my case, to have water, caffeine, whether it's sodas, coffee, teas, and things, and then notepads and pens, because half the time people don't bring them with them, surprisingly. But it's really nice to have that, because if I'm doing a 4-hour training, that's a long time. So caffeine just naturally, kind of helps keep people awake. The hardest time to train is after lunch. It's not that people aren't interested. It's they've already put in a half day working at the desk or whatever the case may be, really hectic and busy. Then they've had their lunch. They come into this, it's warmer in the afternoon. And for those of you using a projector, it gives off that humming sound and sometimes a little heat, and it just makes it so cozy. People just want to fall asleep. As a trainer, I've wanted to fall asleep. So it helps to say, hey, let's get up and stretch. If you need to grab a soda, if you need to grab coffee, do so. But we've got a lot to learn here. And if all else fails, try bribery. I'm serious. We used to build into our expense reports, all of my trainers. I said, grab a bag of candy and pack it with you and then pull it out. Because if you're doing a 4-hour class and at 2 hours, you give people a 15-minute a convenience break and they return, they're always so excited to find that in their absence, candy's been sprinkled about. And it just re-energizes them for the second half of the training, whatever it takes, right? All right. Also in delivery, I always say not everybody can be a trainer. Remember, we want to be nurturers. So you need to really kind of focus on when you're training, what are the benefits, right, to that person? What are they going to gain from attending this training? So remember the what. What does this feature do? What is it for? How does it make my life easier? Why does this apply to me? How does it make a difference to my job? How does it make my life better? So I use a lot of analogies when I'm training. Back in the days when I was a concierge, itineraries were a luxury. Now they're, digital and blah, 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 blah. So making it real. Also, I talk about building foundations. People sometimes see somebody who's too close to software, they just throw information, it's just point click and you're still trying to follow along. This is all new to you. Remember the fresh eyes that I talk about? So I like to think about building a foundation, putting down the flooring and then putting up the frame and then the walls and then the roof and then the little nuances are going to be the windows and the decorations and things. Or you can think of it as layering, but think about the approach of not just this is how this feature works. Why does this feature work this way? Well, what was it designed to do? Oh, well, it was for this challenge. So how can I make that applicable to this challenge? So the more that you can make a feature specific to a customer's needs, the more they're likely to pay attention and buy into it. And they're going to say, oh, wow. I hadn't been on site training, obviously, none of us have for the last year and a half or last year, but I finally got to go on site a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, I was a little bit nervous to be up in front of people again, but I was absolutely delighted because afterwards they said, oh, this was the best training I've ever had. I wish you could do our other trainings. You know, that's really flattering. So I had to really think about, okay, well, what made that fun? And that's what I'm trying to share with you today, so that hopefully, you know, you get a lot of those remarks as well. And we talked about performance art, right? Training. You're on stage, so bring it. Okay, so training, it requires a lot of energy, and it's okay to make fun. I always joke that, like, I'm a stand-up comic. When I did that training a couple of weeks ago, like I said, I hadn't done it in a long time. I couldn't even remember what to pack and things, where I used to be a great road warrior. And so the last day I had a class of 14, and I only had I brought navy blue trousers and a little jumper, and I brought the scarf, but then I also found this wonderful little pearl collar, a little Peter Pan collar, and I thought, oh, that's really cute. So dumb me, never having worn it before, I decided, okay, I'm going to wear that. Well, that collar had a mind of its own, and it kept moving about, and I get in front of the classroom, and I've got these 14 people who are probably bored because they've gone through training and training and training, and I'm up there, and I'm, you know, and I know this collar is going to keep on moving. So I just finally told them, I said, you know, I apologize, probably a bad fashion choice. I look like a demented little orphan Annie. You know, and everybody started laughing, and it was fine because it set an expectation. Suddenly people were like, okay, this is like my umpteenth training for the week, but hey, this actually could be kind of fun. We've got a live wire here. So like I say, it's okay to have a lot of fun with what you're doing. The other thing I recommend is padding your training where you can by about 15 to 30 minutes, okay? Because oftentimes people are coming late, and it's not that they're irresponsible. It's, you know how it is. You get caught on a call or emails or another conference call. You have to be forgiving. So I always build a little intro time in there and chat and get to know the team members that have joined by a few minutes to allow those latecomers to join us, and both physically and mentally join us. Also, by padding, I want to make sure I have time for Q&A at the end. And if we wind up finishing early, then hallelujah, you've just given them back 15, 20 minutes of their life, and you're going to be a hero in their eyes, because suddenly they get to go to the restroom and they get to check their email before they have to jump into their next meeting. So just some things to kind of consider. And then the statement, we're all adults here, but are we really? I've literally, and I'm sure some of you have experienced this, where I have people sitting in the back, passing notes, yeah, or doing this on their phone, checking social media. You know, I've given them what I call the silent method, where many of you may remember in school where the teacher's talking and half the class is paying attention, and there's a few people in the back who aren't, and then you just suddenly kind of stop talking. You're not calling anyone out, you just stop until they catch up. And suddenly that silence, they realize, okay, it's really quiet, and they look up and, oh, okay, sorry. And, you know, sometimes that's all it takes for them to, again, make themselves more present and involved in the training. I've actually had to take phones away a couple times or set out a basket and say, okay, we're all going to leave our phones. But I also know that there's sometimes people are on duty, or some people are using their technology to take notes on their phone, and that's fine too. But, you know, just gauge your audience. The most important thing is making sure that they're not disruptive of the rest of the class. Again, I like to build a day for or time into the actual training classroom to do the hands-on part. because again, we're thinking about the kinesthetic learner, right? So the person who needs to try it out, to get that to absorb. And I don't just say that for the end. If I have a 4-hour class, I might break it up into 3 sections so that we learn the foundation, the walls, right? The frame, the walls, and then we do all that hands-on. And then we come back and we put on the roof and we put on the doors and the windows and we try all that and absorb that. And then for the last part of the class is going to be the decorating and all the little details. So again, that is really ideal for kinesthetic learners. I also like to extend, when possible, an extra day for the go live. I like to be there to stand behind them. I call myself active wallpaper. I will be in the lobby so that I can make sure that they go in and start using it. And I'm gently there to nudge them and guide them to make sure they're in the right place. Because when you hang up or when you leave, it's so much easier for those people to go back when the hotel's really busy and such, or whatever their business is, they've got things waiting, customers waiting. It's so easy to go back to what they know and what's familiar to them, versus if I can be there and say, I know you're super busy and I know it's easier to do this, but trust me, once you learn this platform, it's going to be even easier, but we need to jump in and do it. And I'm going to be your crutch, and I'm here if you need questions answered. So if you can build that in, it's a great way to really make sure that they're absorbing what you've taught them. And then finally, surveys. Surveys, what do they tell us? You can't handle the truth. Remember that movie? So don't be afraid of a little criticism. It's how we improve, right? So some of the things that I've shared here, surveys help us to understand how people learn best. Did the trainer speak too fastly or too softly? Did they speak too quickly? Like I'm sure I am right now, going through the speed of light. Were there a lot of disruptions? Did the content make sense to them? Is the product up to snuff? You need to know, if something's not working of the software that you've trained them on, and it's the software itself, well, yeah, you need to know that as well. Was the course too long? Was it too short? So that over time, really you get to a place where you have it down to a science. And of course, how can we continue to improve? So I hope that what I've shared with you today, any little snippet that you're able to take forward with you, that it improves the way that you train or gives you some insight or some ideas, then I'm thrilled for you. And at this point, we should be able to take a few questions. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I have a question here. Where do you start when establishing new processes? That's a great question. I think it's really, again, start with the customer. Start with the customer. Get a feel for, talk to your salesperson who sold the product to that customer. What was it that made them choose your product? What, because they're the ones who are going to know what the pain points were. And then, and kind of design from there, timing wise, and how people learn and such, and try a few different methods. It may, starting out of the gate, you may not have it down to science, but over time with trial and error and feedback, you will hone that and really get it perfected. So how do you pitch new ways of onboarding processes to your leadership? Wow, that's a hard one, isn't it? Again, I think it's knowing not just what you are pitching to them, but you always have to show the benefits, right? So it comes down to that sales. And in this case, your leadership is your customer this time. So what is it that is going to take for them to buy into it? What speaks to them? Talk to their administrative assistants, get some feedback so that you have a good understanding of what's going to sell, what's going to click in their mind to embrace that. Do you have and need a budget for training tools? Yeah, another great question. I do, but I will tell you, every company I've worked for, we always look for the freebies first. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you guys are cheap. It just means that, you're cognizant that there's expenses in operating. So there's a lot of free version of tools. I mean, even like when I do the webinar training, we use Google Hangouts. Well, as a company, we have to pay for that. But, as an individual, I mean, it's free. So there's a lot of things that are free first. And then being budget conscious doesn't mean going with the cheapest program either, because that can backfire on you. So, but, maybe if you want to create like a portal and you want to introduce that idea to your executives and the people who have to make that budget decision, show them all the free things that you've tried to incorporate, and then show them the things that will work together that you may have to pay for, and come up with a kind of a combination success there. How do you approach different stakeholders when training? So that's a good question. So again, it's the calling ahead, or getting a feel for them, because if you can ask colleagues, you can ask their bosses. I have done this many, many times, and sometimes you just have to pad yourself in a little extra time if you can. I can give you a very specific experience many, many years ago, very early on in my first year of doing hospitality training. I was at a hotel in New York. And first time this ever came up, I had an older gentleman who you could already tell was kind of nervous and thought the technology was going to replace him and such. And he said, I can see how this could be beneficial to me, but I'm not going to use it. And his boss was sitting right next to him. But I guess his boss knew him quite well. And he says, you don't really have a choice. So what did I do? After the training, I needed him to go live. I went and had my dinner, and I came back and I stood in that lobby until 9:30 at night, hand holding him through every process in a live environment. And 2 months later, I was at a conference that he was, and he came over and he said, if anybody tells you they can't use your software, have them come talk to me. It's just, you just have to really gauge one by one sometimes, and maybe try and find a way, even if it's a conference call later, that you have a one-on-one with them to help them through. What is your strategy for resistant customers? Yeah. So that kind of talks to that as well. And now you need trained employees who don't want to change their software. That's it. That's where you have to know what are their pain points and how this can be better than what they're currently using, or how it's going to make their life easier. Because again, like I say, the one constant in life is change, but also equally, people don't want to change. So you have to get them to buy into it, and you have to understand, beginning with the pain points. What is it that they're suffering from, and how can this technology that you're introducing alleviate that frustration and that pain for them without making their job harder and even more cumbersome? Let me see. How do you deal with when you need to do data import, export to the new software? Do you send the client templates time before the implementation, or do you do an extra session to teach the client all the data required to do a smooth implementation on D-Day? Wow, I get it, I do. I've actually had to manage people transitioning from one company's software to ours multiple times. And so oftentimes that information is exported into a spreadsheet. And it's a very tedious process initially, because you kind of have, people have different languages, different ways that they say things. I mean, like in the US, we're tracking packages. It's parcels elsewhere, or hold for collection, or to be called for. Everybody has different nuances in how they describe things. So I had to go through, and I had to kind of do a language translation, almost field for field, word for word, so that we could then import it. And even then, it's not perfect, and some of the information had to go into the notes. But the key thing was, Was it readily accessible? Was it easy to find? And that was the most important thing. Did it look a little different from the way that you saw it laid out in your previous platform? Yeah, it probably did. But were you able to find it? And was all the information there for you to that you needed? Yes, it was. And that's a pain point, a hurdle that actually goes away pretty quickly after a couple months, because then all the new content is going into the new software, and they're going to rely less and less on the content of the old software that you transferred over. So I hope that helps. Let's see, how do you support retention now when budget is a major issue? Yeah, that's so hard. We're all wearing multiple hats. I think part of that is how technology is built to help you wear the multiple hats. You know, the technology, I don't like that it replaces human beings. It really shouldn't, but it should make you more efficient at what you do, and kind of allow you to manage multiple areas. You know, I hope that helps. What activities have you implemented during the pandemic? Well, actually, the university portal was a big one. One, because I had the time to do it. But two, we knew early on that, you know, as big as this pandemic was going to be, on-site training was, you know, maybe off to, it wasn't coming back, or it wasn't going to come back as strong. We were going to have to keep that distance learning. So how could we then make it that much more successful? Well, I still do my video trainings, but then having the university portal allows that the people to kind of train themselves even more so, because, you know, my time is limited, but access to the portal is 24/7, anytime that they can utilize it. So hopefully that helps. When does a hand-holding stop? That's a good question. That's where relationships come in really handy, building those relationships. You know, I would say 90% of the time, the hand-holding stops pretty quickly after you leave. So the way I approach it is, people used to always ask me, how long is it going to take me to get used to the software? And I say, well, you know, the first couple of days is going to be frustrating and maybe sometimes a bit overwhelming, but stay at it. And in a week, it becomes easier and easier. And honestly, a month from now or 2 months, you're going to be like, how did I do this job before we had this? But there's always going to be those who maybe need a little bit extra. And, you know, they've got my email. They've got our company phone number for support. And we had this regular who we all know, we didn't even have to see the name. We could see the phone number ring and we knew exactly who it was. And at first it kind of like drove us nuts, like, oh my gosh, here we go again. But after that, he just became beloved to us, because we realized it wasn't that he just wasn't getting it. He was just so curious, so hungry to learn, and he loved the platform, and he just wanted to absorb every piece of it. You know, so he makes up for the 90% who are okay on their own. Our goal is to teach customers to be self-sufficient. What do you do with customers that need your help constantly and see no improvement after your training? Oh, you know, quite frankly, we actually have had to talk to some people, like who they report to, not in so much the sense that we're saying, oh, you know, gosh, you've got a thick one here. But it's more that maybe they could use a little bit of additional hand-holding internally, and that's where champions, remember I said create a champion at that location or in that department, so that they can rely less on you and more on the champion. And it may require you to come back to that champion and do a little extra work with them one time, so that that person who's not getting it, that's who they go to. Okay, I'm going to have to wrap it up, but I'll answer this one last question. How do you overcome language barriers during the training session? Great question. I have traveled all over the world. I'm probably very fortunate because in hospitality, you know, everybody kind of has, English is kind of the the business language, but there's always accents. I was very fortunate. My mother's from Japan, so I grew up with a pretty thick accent listening, so I've got a good ear for it. But it's really just about speaking slowly, repeat often. I ask, are there any questions? I sometimes have people feed back to me, because I found when I go to some countries, you say, are there any questions, or do you get it? And they're like, but then when you ask them a very specific direct question, then you realize they haven't retained it. And that's where you learn and you repeat, and hopefully, find different ways of getting that information through to them. Hope that helps. Anyway, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Again, I'm having one of those days where, my hair's just going everywhere, but go figure. Like I say, make it human. Thanks so much, everyone. Pleasure. Take care.
Hands up, get down. I'm on the bring that attitude.